just when I thought I couldn't go any lower, I find myself in the bottom of the jail cell. And when I tell you, it was a darkness that I couldn't describe. It was dark. It smelled. It was so loud. There were people in there that were losing their minds. I was locked up with the real murderers in this place. And I really honestly thought about just giving up. And when I say giving up, you know what I mean. I heard that voice again, and it simply said this. It said, lift up your mattress. First time it said, lift up your mattress, I disregarded it. But it was persistent. Lift up your mattress. And so after the third time, I lifted up my mattress. And you want to know what I found? Underneath my mattress, all of those years ago, in that jail, when I was getting ready to go for first-degree murder to prison, you know what I found? I found the keys to unlock every door. I found a Bible. That night, a peace came over me. It was like I was washed with a liquid love. A tangible presence invaded my space that night. And I said, God, if you are real, I'll serve you forevermore. And I went to sleep. Rededicated my life, but maybe it was for the first time I really understood Jesus and the price that he paid for me. But I walked away with something more valuable than any amount of money. I walked away with a up-close, personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and that would sustain me for the rest of my life. And I'm saying that to say so many things like that. We can go all night about how many supernatural things that God had done and has done in my life. But Stacy, you already know there was this thing that I never told anybody. I never mentioned it.
Let's go. Derrick Frank, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You and your wife, Lisa, have made the journey over from Atlanta. I watched a video of yours not too terribly long ago, and we somehow got disconnected and then reconnected again. And you got a great story. And when we were on the call, I saw a lot of, I think God showed me some stuff on the call about your story that maybe you didn't even realize about it, which is really cool. We ask God to do wonderful things through the conversation. And it's not just for our audience, but a lot of times it's for our guests. It's always for me too. It's how God works. But I'm ready to jump in. Welcome, first of all.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
People sit in that chair because they've experienced God. How have you experienced God?
I have experienced God in so many ways until it's hard for me to remember them all. But I can remember a time where I really didn't believe. I didn't know if God was real or not. I did the church thing. I went to church because my mom said, in this house, you're going to go to church. Mm-hmm. I did it because that's what you're supposed to do. That's how I was raised. I grew up, it seems like from the early start, I was almost destined to fail. I was in severe poverty. I was in an abusive situation. My mother's boyfriend was very, very abusive. I grew up without my father. And I used to often ask my mom about my father, and I could tell that it bothered her, just me asking questions about him. And one day she got really, really upset and tired of me asking, and she said, listen, I'm your mother and I'm your father. Don't ask me again. Mm. And so I just stopped asking her. And so I grew up without a father, but my mother found her knight in shining armor and moved us from Louisiana to Arkansas. And almost before we can get our stuff unpacked, the abuse started. Mm. I can remember as a little boy covering my head under a pile of clothes, under my blankets, and waiting for the morning to come because she was being abused in the other room. My only hope and dream as a little boy was to be able to leave this small town and get away from this abuse. And I wanted to be strong enough, big enough, tall enough to stop my mom from being abused. That was my dream as a little boy. So I guess I went to church because my mom told me that's what I was supposed to do. But I think that she went to church just to try to find some type of peace in this new existence that we found ourselves in. But to be honest with you, I didn't know if God was real or not. I just did the church thing because that's what I was told to do. I enjoyed the church people. I loved the food. The people were beautiful. The music, I always loved to sing. My sister and I, we even joined the choir. But that's about the extent of my relationship with God. You know, I just ask questions like, if God is real, how can he allow me to go through everything that I'm going through? Mm-hmm. Where is he? Is he in Jupiter? Is he on Mars? Is he here, there? I just really didn't know. So I did the church thing. Church. We even went to church 2 times on Sunday, but I didn't know if God was real or not.
Hey, that is not an uncommon story. I think, yes, we need to raise our kids in faith. We try to have conversations in our house that I never had when I was growing up about the reality of God and not just the traditions of the church. So that, and I know if for my kids, it's not easy to understand, right? You think God's in heaven, you think up in heaven somewhere. That's like somewhere out in space. There's some location out in space, and they don't grasp the concept of heaven as sort of on some sort of different dimension than what we're able to experience, no matter how far we travel. So we try to have those kind of conversations. I never had those either when I was growing up. It was just, this is what we do. And if I'm honest with you, the church kids where I grew up were pretty lame, right? And it was like, I don't want to hang out with them. I want to hang out with the fun kids. And so I don't know that I ever, at some point you do ask some of those questions like, why is there suffering and death and all these things? Where is God? Is he even real in the first place? So I think most people can relate to what you're describing as a kid, as far as your view of faith, God, church, and all that stuff. Some of the abuse, and that's a different part of the story. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, and so, like I said, my dream, my heart's cry was just to get away. I thought that if I could just get away from this abusive situation, I thought that if I can just move geographically, that will solve all of my problems. Mm-hmm. So I finally had my chance. I joined the military and moved away. That was my ticket out of there. I would have called a plane, a train. I would have walked out of this place. Finally had my opportunity to leave. And so, of course, I didn't join the military for the right reasons. I really couldn't get my mind around serving my country. And so I didn't really do it for the right reason, but it was my ticket. Mm-hmm. And so I joined the military and I moved away. Stayed in the military for a little bit, got out of the military and found a girlfriend. And I carried some of those good habits and bad habits with me when I joined the military from back home. Smoking weed, drinking, and the church thing. I always went to church because that's how I was raised. Even though I was drinking and smoking, I still was going to church. And so I was kind of got a job. And the next thing I know, I'm working these low-end jobs and having a hard time making ends meet. And I found myself going to the pawn shop just trying to make ends meet. So one day I had this bright idea. It's like, since I smoke marijuana, how about I just sell marijuana? Since everybody around me was smoking and drinking, sell a little marijuana. That's never hurt anybody. But now that I look at it, that was a trick from the enemy. So I started selling marijuana, and I got introduced to this guy who had a connection with the Mexican cartel. This guy could get any kind of drug known to man: cocaine, crystal meth, Percocets, pills, steroids, anything. But growing up in back home, I always used to hate the smell of crack cocaine. I had smelled it before, and it gave me a funny vibe. So I didn't want to hang around those drugs, those big drugs. So I decided to sell marijuana, and a friend of mine came to me one day and he said, "Hey man, I know you have a connection that can get anything that we want. How about, can you get us some cocaine?" So I said, I don't know. Well, how much money are we talking? And so I really didn't want to get involved in it, but I was just going to do this deal, and that was going to be it. But I tell you, that particular month, things were just going haywire. I had so many warnings, so many people that I was going to church with. They were dreaming. Police was pulling us over. That month, it was almost like the climax to something that wasn't good. And I had a friend that I grew up with. His mother, she had the gift of dreams.
Like prophetic dreams?
Prophetic dreams.
Yeah.
And we went to church with her. And so we was going back and forth to church. And when she would dream, it would come true. But unfortunately, every time she would dream, it would always be something negative. It would always be like a warning dream for us, and this woman, when she came to you and she dreamed about you, you can take it to the bank. And I had some type of solace because she never dreamed about me. She dreamed about everybody.
You see her coming, you take off running the other way. You don't want to hear about this.
No.
Or you need to know.
I honored her. I honored her, man. I honored her. And that's the thing. I always honored people from the church.
Yeah.
I always honored them. I loved the church, loved being around them. So when she spoke, I listened. But she would bring stuff to people. Hey, be careful. This is going to happen. This is going to be happening. And sometimes when she would have a dream, it's a warning that could be stopped if you heeded the warning.
Yeah. Scripture's filled with God saying that, right?
Oh, yeah. So I witnessed people that she dreamed about that didn't heed the warning, and it ended a lot of times in bloodshed.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I was happy that she never dreamed about me. And so we were going to church. And what I'm saying is, this whole month, things were kind of off kilter. Now, I know that I shouldn't have been selling drugs. And I knew that if my mom found out that I was selling drugs, she would not be happy.
Were you back in Arkansas?
No. I lived in Topeka, Kansas.
Okay.
When I got out of the military, I lived in Topeka, Kansas.
Was she where you were, or was she still in Arkansas?
Your
mom?
My mother lived in Arkansas.
Okay.
Yes. And so we were up north, and all of this was going on. And so I ended up going to church. And one day I went to church. The man of God laid his hands on my head. And he put his hands on my head and he says, "The devil's going to try to kill you." And he snatched his hand away and he laughed. He said, "Ha! But I'm going to pray he don't succeed." This man, I wasn't familiar with the prophetic then. I was like, how in the world can this man know that I'm surrounded by trouble? Because everything was going on that month. And so finally, my friend's mom, the one who dreamed, she finally came to me. She said, "Hey, God woke me up last night, and you and my son, you guys are surrounded by trouble. Now, I don't know what it is that you're doing, but whatever it is, trouble is on the way." Now, you want to ask yourself, why didn't I just stop? Because sometimes it's not that easy just to stop. I had all these drugs, and mind you, my dream was to get enough money to where I could move to Atlanta and start over. That wasn't my long-term goal. But it seems as though every time I saw it out, every time I thought I had enough money, something would happen. And this month was full of it. So the man of God lays his hands on my head. This woman is dreaming, and this month is just going crazy. So I made up in my mind that I was going to go ahead and sell the last little bit of these drugs and set this deal up, and I was going to be done. But little did I know that I was walking into a trap set by the enemy.
Okay. Tell me about it, man.
You want to hear about it?
Yeah.
Okay. That particular morning when I woke up, I had did drug deals before, marijuana deals. But that particular morning when I woke up, I had a feeling in the pit of my stomach. For some reason, it was focused in the pit of my stomach. And I did something that I normally wouldn't do. This feeling, I would say this feeling was almost like butterflies times a million, but it was focused in my stomach. So I got on my hands and knees and I said a prayer. I said, God, I know that I am wrong for doing this, but you know my heart. You know I never had a father. You know, only thing I ever want to do is make my mother proud and have a slice of this so-called American pie. Working these dead-end jobs, I just want to just move away and start fresh. You know my heart. Please be with me as I go and do something that I know that I shouldn't be doing. Now, it may sound crazy, but that was unfiltered, straight up prayer that I prayed. Fast forward the story, it was supposed to be me and my friend at the house. So when the guys came to buy the drugs, they were surprised to find out that we were not alone. It was me. It was the guy who was hooked up with the Mexican cartel. It was his bodyguard. It was my bodyguard. I really never liked having guns around, so I had a bodyguard. So when the guys came to buy the drugs, they were surprised to find out that we were not by ourselves. And they were just acting weird. The whole thing was weird. And so we had the drugs on the table, and they said, well, you guys are not going to allow us to walk out of here. And I was like, what are you talking about? You said that you want a certain amount. I have it. Why are you concerned about who's in the house? So the last thing I remember is the guy who brought the drugs. He looked at me. He said, now, this is weird. Normally, when you call me, it's an easy transition. What is going on now with these guys? I said, I don't know what's going on. They're acting weird, but I know I'm done talking to them. You can negotiate. And by the way, I apologize for this whole mix up. And they started negotiating. He said, man, I'll drop it $1,000. That's the last thing I heard. But then something crazy happened. I heard a voice. The voice simply said, look out in the back of your yard. So I obeyed the voice. I opened up the door. I put one foot in the back of the yard, and all of a sudden, gunshots rang out. Now, you don't know me, so I could tell you anything. I can tell you, listen, I went in and I was the hero. I saved the day. But to be honest with you, I ran. I remember what the man of God told me when he lays his hand on my head. I remember the dreams. I remember that bad feeling, so I ran. And it seemed like everything was in slow motion. I ran as fast as I could. And as I was running, I had a vision of me I saw my grave with one little flower on it. To me, it was signifying that after everything that I had done on this earth, would it even matter that I even lived? And everything was in slow motion. I even can feel the bullets zip past my ear, and I ran for my life. I ran, and finally I made it to my destination over my friend's house. I called back over to where this drug deal was going on, and my bodyguard answered the phone, and he said, the high roller is dead in the backyard. His bodyguard has been shot 3 times. The police are here, and they only have one question. Where are you at? And things went crazy downhill from that point.
Okay. So this is about experiencing God. This is a pretty intense situation you're talking about here. You said that you heard a voice. What do you mean you heard a voice?
I don't know if the voice was audible. I might want to say that I received communication from something bigger or other than myself. Some people might say it was just a thought, but I obeyed it. It wasn't something that I was thinking about. It just floated in like, you need to go outside. You need to check your backyard. That's not something I was thinking about. So I obeyed it. So when I say voice, I don't really have a way to articulate it. It was communication from something outside of me.
Was it fear?
I think I was fearful, but I don't think that communication was fear.
So when you're in an intense situation like that, I mean, guns are obviously present, right? I mean, you know that, right? You know who's got them, and they got them. Our guys got them. I don't, but what's the difference between, I want to know, were you just emotionally responding to the situation of, I need to get out of here, right? We understand those feelings. It's a feeling versus something outside of you actually communicating with you.
Well, remember I told you before that I had to apologize to the high roller because this has never happened before. Now,
Right.
we had did drug deals, but this whole month was just a weird month. Used to being around guns, we were glorified drug dealers. So this wasn't my first time being around guns. I wasn't really fearful about this drug deal. It was something other than that, starting with that feeling that morning. So it was, this whole month was just weird, and this was the climax to everything that was strange. People were dreaming. This woman, the man of God laid his hand on my head. It was almost like a silent drum beat to something, leading to something that wasn't good. And that morning, it was like I had did stuff that I shouldn't do. I knew that I shouldn't have been selling drugs, but this particular morning, I had a feeling that I've never had before, and I think that voice, that communication, had to do with all of it was tied together.
Yeah, it's just, I think about situations. There's things that I get in and have in my life, in my history, where it's like, we need to get out of here. You know what I'm saying? Whatever the situation, I mean, I could sit here and list you 25 scenarios or situations that I've been in. It's like, we need to get out of here, right? Tension, whatever else it is. There's that. And that could be God. I'm not saying that can't be God, right? But that's a thing inside. It's like, this doesn't add up. We need to get out of here. Versus what it sounds like you're saying is like, no, I was fine, but something outside of me said, you need to get out of here. There's a difference between, we need to get out of here, and something like, I'm okay. Oh, what? I need to get out of here? Was it a communication like that? I'm kind of wanting to know what the difference of those two is.
Well, the difference is this was something that I wasn't even thinking about.
Yeah.
Wasn't even thinking about it. It came from outside of me.
Okay.
And it's almost like it wasn't a request. It was almost like boom, and I was like, next thing you know, I'm outside. It was supernatural.
Well, I mean, that's kind of where I'm getting at, right? I mean, we have an instinct that we need to go and do something, and I think God communicates that way too. But when it goes beyond that, where we feel like it's something coming from outside of us, I like to analyze things like this. I like to take a look at this because there's a lot of potential natural explanations for what caused you to go outside that day.
Oh yeah.
I know all the things leading up to it, and thing in the pit of your stomach, and things are not adding up, and prophetic dreams, and all that kind of stuff, and all that adding up can say, I need to. All this trouble could be coming right now. I probably need to get out of here. Versus what you feel like is a thing happened outside of you that actually broke in and did that. To me, that's a case for a supernatural presence, God.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Versus intuition, even though I think intuition often is God as well. So anyway, this is our first real conversation or bit of the conversation where you believe you maybe have experienced God in the middle of a drug deal, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you ran, called back, where are you, that sort of thing. So pick up everything from there because I know that there's more.
And so I was so naive. I thought that I could work this thing out. Now, I had did a lot of things, but I didn't kill anybody. Only thing I was guilty of is trying to make some money. And so in my mind, being so naive, I thought that I could talk to the police, straighten everything out, and just be honest about it. I was selling, trying to make some money, but I didn't shoot anybody. I didn't kill anybody. I'm innocent. So I called my girlfriend and I said, hey, I need you to pick me up right now. She had no idea that I was doing the stuff that I was doing. And so I said, can I spend the night with you? She said, yes, but I have children and you can spend one night and then you got to go. So I went over her house and I spent the night and she had a dream. She woke up the next morning and she said, I had a dream. And I was like, what in the world is going on with all of these people dreaming? I said, what was the dream about? She said, I had a dream you're going to jail. And I was like, no. Your dream couldn't be true. I know I have some questions to answer, but I'm innocent. I'm the victim here. And she said, well, I had a dream. She said, you know what? I think that you probably should leave because I don't want this to filter into my life and my children's life. So I said, just when I need you, you're kicking me out. She said, well, I have children. You got to go. And I'll tell you this much. You know, when I was selling drugs and we had women and we were rolling dice and I feel like I was on top of the world. But when I got in trouble, all of my so-called friends disappeared and I looked around, it was just me. And so here she is telling me to get out, kicking me out. And I called a friend to take me to Walmart so that I can get some clothes. Couldn't go back home. The place was surrounded by police. So I went to Walmart to get a change of clothes. And as I was checking out, I looked on the big screen TV and I noticed my picture with a big sign on it saying wanted for murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and robbery. I had a hat on. I tucked it real low and tiptoed out of Walmart. And like I said, I didn't have any friends, so I found myself in an old little hotel, and I made the phone call to my mother, the only person that I didn't want to disappoint. And I said, Mom, I'm in trouble. And she said, I told you, do not get in trouble. All of your life, I told you don't get in trouble because I don't have any money to get you out of trouble, so don't get in trouble. And so she said, if you didn't do what they say you're doing, don't run, turn yourself in. So I turned myself in, talked to the detectives, and I just had one question for them. I said, guys, why do you have my face all across the news wanted for murder? And they simply said, a guy's dead. We already know this is a drug deal gone bad. The guy who was shot 3 times in the back, he's getting an operation. But before he went in for operation, we went to talk to him. We asked him what happened. He said that you killed the guy and you shot him and you robbed him. Me. And I laid on that floor and sobbed like a baby. I just could not believe that this guy was saying these things about me that wasn't true. They had everything they needed to put me in prison for a long time. And so just when I thought that I couldn't go any lower, I find myself charged with first-degree murder. And so when they took me to jail, in life, there's different levels to despair, different levels to fear, different levels to being tormented. And just when I thought that I couldn't get any lower, I find myself in the bottom of the jail cell. I didn't even know that there was a place. They put me in a special place. It was called S module. There was a special place that was underneath the jail. Just when I thought I couldn't go any lower, I find myself in the bottom of the jail cell. And when I tell you, it was a darkness that I couldn't describe. It was dark. It smelled. It was so loud. There were people in there that were losing their minds. There were people who had molested children. I was locked up with the real rapists, murderers in this place. And it was so loud. And so the people came to my cell that were there and they were celebrating this robbery. These are the type of people who I was surrounded by. They were celebrating, saying, we heard that you committed this robbery and how much money did you get, with smiles on their faces. And something rose up on the inside of me. I said, I'm the victim. And they start calling me a snitch, started pouring urine and feces underneath my door. So I was in a low place in this small jail cell. And I realized that I had been running all of my life. I ran from Arkansas, all of the pain and abuse, and here I am. I find myself, just when I think that I couldn't go any lower, I'm in the bottom of the jail cell. And these people are so loud. And I really honestly thought about just giving up. And when I say giving up, you know what I mean. I mean tying a sheet around my neck and saying goodbye to this world for the last time. And so as I was getting the sheet, something miraculous happened that day. I heard that voice again. And it simply said this. It said, lift up your mattress. Now you got to understand, I had been drinking and smoking for 2 years straight. So here I am. It's so loud. It's so dark. I'm charged with first-degree murder. And I'm full of emotions. And now I'm hearing voices.
How long were you in this place?
I just got there that night.
So it was that day.
It was
the
that
day you
night.
got there.
It was that night.
Okay.
And so I'm hearing voices. Lift up your mattress. And I disregarded the voice. I was like, lift up my mattress. I'm going crazy. I'm hearing stuff.
Was it the same voice?
Yes.
Did you recognize that as the voice that spoke to you in the house?
Not right away. Not right away. I thought that I was going crazy. It was so many things going on at one time. I was having hot flashes and cold flashes. I was having withdrawal symptoms from the drugs and the alcohol.
Was this a withdrawal symptom?
No, it wasn't. But I was having withdrawal symptoms.
Was this a voice outside of you like the other one, or was it?
It was a voice. It wasn't me. It wasn't me because I disregarded it. When I first heard, lift up your mattress, I thought to myself, like, for what? There's nothing here. I had been in jail before for little traffic violations, so I already knew there was nothing there. So first time it said, lift up your mattress, I disregarded it. But it was persistent. Lift up your mattress. And it was almost like it got stronger. And so after the third time, I lifted up my mattress. And you want to know what I found? Underneath my mattress, all of those years ago, in that jail, when I was getting ready to go for first-degree murder to prison, you know what I found? I found the keys to unlock every door. I found a Bible. And I picked it up that night. And I began to do something that I had never done before. I picked it up and I began to read it for myself. You see, all of those years in church, I never really picked it up and began to read those 66 books. And that night, for some reason, the scriptures that I read, it spoke of Jesus. It spoke of how he came to this earth. It spoke of how he laid down his life. It spoke of how he picked it up again. And it was like I was reconnected in a fresh new way with Jesus. I didn't know that God had a son. I didn't know that God, put on flesh and walked this earth. That night, it was focused on what Jesus did for us as humanity. And I didn't know. I really didn't know. But I said a simple prayer that night. I said, God, in the name of Jesus, if you are real, if you're really, really real, if you get me out of this trouble, I'll serve you forevermore. And it was like that night, a peace came over me. It was like I was washed with a liquid love, a tangible presence invaded my space that night. And I said, God, if you are real, I'll serve you forevermore. And I went to sleep, rededicated my life. I want to say rededicating, but maybe it was for the first time I really understood Jesus and the price that he paid for me. And so I went to bed that night. And when I was out in the world doing everything that I was big enough and bad enough to do, I would be lying to you to tell you that I had peace about any of it. I never had peace. But that night, I hadn't slept in years. That night, I slept so good. Slept so good that night. I slept so good, I didn't even know that I was in jail that next morning. I was startled, had so much peace. I was startled to know that I was even in jail. But it was something about that Bible. I felt it, that it was something about it. So the Bible that I found that night was a thin, skinny Bible. I requested a full Bible, and I began to read the word.
So they gave you another Bible?
Yes, I requested one the next day, and they gave me one.
Huh.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember what you read that night?
Well, even now, I'm really not good at going to chapter and verse by memorization. But I will tell you this. I read that all things are possible for those who believe. I read that that Christ walked his earth, Emmanuel, God with us. I read stuff like that. I read without faith, it is impossible to please the Lord. Things like that I read that night.
Well, I mean, you're talking about taking your own life, hearing a voice, finding a Bible, and apparently reading enough to be awakened to things that you had never learned in all those years in church. I mean, you're going to church all the time. Talk about not knowing that God had a son. It's hard to go to church and not know that, right? Unless you just tuned it all completely out. I mean, Jesus is the backbone of most American churches. It's hard to imagine that you didn't know that. Just wonder what you read in that small amount of time before you went, from the time you got there and till the time you went to sleep.
Well, it just, that night focused on Jesus. I had heard Jesus before, but be honest with you, I went to church for the females. I went to church because the music was good. I went to church because the food was good. But as far as the working knowledge of 2 + 2, Jesus, God, I didn't have it. I didn't have it. I definitely didn't. That night, I had a realization that I would never be good enough. That night, I got the realization that the price had already been paid. And the only thing I needed to do is receive it.
Yeah, there's a thing that happens that goes from sort of the concepts around Scripture and faith into the reality of, there's an awakening. I call it an awakening. It's revelation. It sounds like that's what you're describing. It was your own awakening to the actual truth of the presence of God, who Jesus actually was versus a person in these stories. Maybe that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I take a look at these things pretty critically when I hear stuff, and what would cause a guy. I mean, I get being in a dire situation and looking for hope and answers, and it's pretty miraculous that there was a Bible in a jail cell at the bottom of the jail under a mattress. Be interesting to know how that got there. But anyway, no, I just thinking through this and what would cause you to feel or experience the changes you did because you began to read a Bible. I mean, you probably don't remember if it was thumbing through it or if it was, hey, I'm starting here and just going.
Well, it all began. I believe it all began when I escaped with my life.
Yeah.
And then going to the jail cell and being washed. And even though I went from getting ready to kill myself to having peace. It was something that was going on. And I really didn't have all the answers that night. But I believe that it was something in this Bible that was my key.
Had you ever prayed before?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I prayed.
Like sincere prayer? Talking to God?
Oh, yeah.
Or just reciting things at church? Or was it just like, no, you had talked to God before?
It was almost like I was saying, hey, remember I told you I didn't know if he was real or not. Even though when I said that prayer that night in the jail cell, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't. I said, God, if you're real, I'm gonna need you to get me out of this. And if you do this, I was bargaining with God, so to speak. Because I had some doubts. If you're really, really real, you get me out of this, I will serve you.
So what happened?
Over the time span of 9.5 months, I read the word.
Were you in prison in jail?
I was in jail for 9.5 months.
Waiting for an arraignment?
Waiting for court.
Okay.
Waiting for court. And so after God started giving me this peace, I believed, I kept reading the word. It says in the Bible that man should not live by bread alone. So unbeknownst to me, I was just reading it. Something about it. I just kept reading it, which is something that I never done before while I was going to church. Reading the word. But I had no clue that I was being changed on the inside. I had no idea what by me reading the word that I was being changed. And so what happened? Peace came. Of the same people that were throwing feces and stuff under my door, they started bringing me food. Things were shifting, and I attribute it to the Bible. Things were shifting, and so I kept reading it. And plus, it brought me joy. It brought me excitement. Yes, I was locked up, and I didn't have all the answers, but I had peace on the inside. I'm not talking about the peace that the world gets. I'm talking about I had a supernatural peace. It was like I was free on the inside, but locked in solitary confinement. By the way, solitary confinement, locked up 23 hours a day, and you only get out one time a day for 1 hour, if they let you. So I was free on the inside, and I was reading my word, and I was just getting just as much as I could about all of the things. And I cried. I often cried just to realize, I realized that I had been tricked all of my life by the enemy. I didn't know that, God loved me. I didn't know all of the things that were in the scriptures and stuff. And I was just being reintroduced. I was maybe introduced for the first time, not religion, but a relationship with Jesus Christ. I look back at it now. I was being introduced to a real relationship with Jesus. So I want to say it again. I read the word. I devoured it. I ate it like It was no end.
Yeah, you didn't have much else you could do, right?
Well, it was a bunch of things that I could have did. I could have watched TV. I could have played pool.
Yeah.
I could have just, but for some reason,
I thought you were in solitary.
well, I end up getting out of solitary.
Okay.
But that's what I'm saying. Things started to shift. I even got out of solitary. I'm glad you asked that. I got out of solitary, but for then I was in solitary confinement. But there were other things that I could have done. And so I read the word, devoured the word. And unfortunately, I was continued. I went to court. But every time I went to court, they said continue. They would say continue. And so one night, it was so strategic. One night, I believe it was, well, I'll never forget it. It was Good Friday. It was Thursday, and that night would be Good Friday, the night that Jesus hung on the cross. And it was so strategic because that night, things got so dark. I had a visitor that day. It was my girlfriend, and she was with my son, and they were crying. And I was like, what's going on? He was like, well, we talked to your lawyer, and he said that you got court tomorrow, but you know what's going to happen, don't you? I said, what's going to happen? And she said, what's been happening for the last 12, 13 times you went to court? It's going to be continued, of course. And so everybody was crying. I was distraught. And I left that conversation. I left the visitor just being kind of depressed. And so I started questioning the whole thing. I was like, am I really going to go to jail for something I didn't do? Even my lawyer thought that I was guilty. He was telling me, listen, tell me the truth. I am telling you the truth. I'm innocent. But he thought that I was guilty too. And so that night, I did what I would normally do when I found myself being fearful or being afraid or just being affected by being locked up behind bars. And I started to read the word again. This time, here comes that voice again. It asked me a question this time. The voice called me by my name and it said, Derrick, you have forgot who I am. Excuse me, that's not that time. The voice asked me, Derrick, how long are you going to read my word and not believe what it says? And before I knew it, I answered the voice. I said, I do believe. And the voice said, no, you don't. Because faith without works is dead. This communication was giving me scripture back to me. And I said, I do believe. He said, no, you do not. Because faith without works is dead. If you believe, you have to do something. Pack up all of your belongings because this time tomorrow, you're going to be a free man. Now, Stacy, I wasn't going anywhere. It was no way.
The voice said this to you?
The voice said it.
Not your imagination.
Not my imagination.
Not wishful thinking.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. The voice said to me, how long are you going to sit there and read my word not believe what it says?
That's a lot fuller sentence than lift up your mattress, right?
Sure is. Sure is. Yes, it is. And so, of course, everything around me was saying no, including the visitor before. So it was like God was asking me to not just read the word, but have faith in the word. So I packed up all my belongings that night and I did something else. By faith, I understood that I had to have faith. And faith without works is dead. And so I wrote a letter that night. On the back of the letter to my girlfriend, I wrote in small, tiny letters. I don't know, it may sound crazy, but I just understood that I had to have faith. I wrote on the back of the letter, and on the back of the letter, I wrote, I told you I would be here. Got the letter the next morning. Now, you got to understand, in jail, everything is on a time schedule. I sit there for 9.5 months. I knew what time we eat. I knew what time we showered. I knew the whole schedule in jail. Everything's on a time schedule. Okay, I knew that if I was going to court, they would call me about 9:15, 9:20. That particular day, of course, they didn't call my name. So I went back to my cell and I started to cry. And I said, God, I thought I heard from you last night. I did what you asked me to do. I packed my belongings up. What's going on here? As I was talking to the Lord, praying to the Lord, I heard a voice. This time it was the jailer. Derrick, get your stuff. You got court. Wow. I sit there all of that time and never seen those doors open up past 9:15, 9:30. But this particular day, on Good Friday, I had court. Now, I had heard another voice. It was the enemy. And he was like, so what? You always go to court, but you're not getting out. You already know you're going to be continued. And it was like a battle, back and forth with positive and negative. And so I made it to court. I saw my lawyer and he said, I told you that I was going to get you out of here. And I didn't even see the judge. I was released. And when I tell you, I was so excited. And it was like God allowed me to go through that whole situation to teach me how to walk by faith and not by sight. Not just to do this church thing, but have an up-close, personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And so I got out of jail. I tell you, it seems as though that before I went to jail, it seemed like everything was dampened. The sky wasn't really a vivid blue. It was like almost like a dullness. I had a dullness on me. And when I got out, the sky was so blue. It was like everything was new. I had peace. I wanted to tell everybody about Jesus Christ. He saved me from getting killed and going to prison for something I didn't do. And my girlfriend, she picked me up and we went by the grocery store. And on the way back from the grocery store, I had a thought like, you know what? I just want to tell everybody about who God is and what he's done in my life. And she said, you know what? Let me stop by the post office. And I said, okay. I didn't think nothing of it. And she came back and she said, you wrote me a letter? I said, yeah, I wrote you a letter by faith. She started to read the letter. She was crying. And she said, I said, turn over the letter and look on the back of it. She turns the letter over and she looks on the back of it and it says, I told you that I would be here. And she said, my God, how did you know that you was going to get out? I said, I didn't know. I said, but for some reason, I knew that I had to walk by faith and not by sight. And she said, wow, this is unbelievable. And so I wanted to leave that town. I told you I was trying to make enough money to move to Atlanta. My dreams of leaving that town with bags of money, it never happened. But I walked away with something more valuable than any amount of money. I walked away with a up-close, personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And that would sustain me for the rest of my life. I walked away. I moved to Atlanta. And yes, I moved to Atlanta.
What do you think happened there, man? What do you think happened in all of this? In
retrospect?
Yeah, you take a look at, you're dealing drugs. You were guilty of a lot of things. It might not have been murder, but, selling drugs can get you some prison time too. And then you're out. And I know you're innocent of the charges of murder. And if that's what you were in on, I can understand that. And I'm not even probably as interested in what happened if you think God supernaturally freed you. There's more than whether you're in jail or not, right, going on here. To me. What do you think happened to cause you to go from being a person who didn't really know if they believed in God to a person who does? And we'll talk about the fruit of that later, but what happened in that window?
Well, number one, you got to understand that somebody died. So let's just rest a second in that. Somebody died.
Mm-hmm.
And the messed up part about it, it was meant for me. They thought that they were coming to rob and kill me. And somebody else got it. And so the warnings from the church people, the dreams, the communication with me hearing a voice telling me to walk outside, I look at all of those things together, and it was like God protected me. He gave me something that I didn't deserve, because what I deserve to get killed, because I was doing something I had no business doing. But God allowed me. He gave me grace. He gave me grace and he gave me mercy, and I did not deserve it. I had did the church thing, but I didn't have a relationship. I didn't even understand what that looked like. But I learned. God allowed me. He took what the enemy meant for evil and turned it around for my good. He allowed, you know what? I tell people all the time that one of the best things that's ever happened to me is me getting locked up. I can say that's one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it taught me that all of these so-called friends, it taught me that I can have an up-close, personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I learned when I was locked down for 9.5 months, I learned that if you're going to please God, you have to do it his way. That's to walk by faith and not by sight. I learned that. And I learned it because there was nowhere else to turn.
When I look and think about the things that you have discussed in your story, you're like, I hear, and you may not agree, may not see it this way. It's kind of why I ask, what do you think happened? I don't know how close you and your mom were during this time. Maybe. I don't know. Is she still in an abusive situation while you're there? Do you know?
My mother, she stayed in that abusive relationship she ended up shooting this guy. My mother's boyfriend, she shot him when I was younger.
Yeah,
I didn't get into all of that.
We didn't even talk about that.
We didn't get into all of that. I ended up cleaning the blood off of the porch when I was 8, 9 years old. So you would think that she got rid of this guy, but unfortunately, she stayed with him and had a child by him. And the abuse continued for maybe 12, 13 more years.
So when you were in Topeka, she was still in Arkansas with him?
Yes, sir.
And nothing had changed with that. Was she still church, prayer, that sort of thing? Did her faith stay in place?
Oh yeah, my mom, and it's a very intricate story, but I'll just tell you this. When we first made it to Arkansas, my mother was raised as a Catholic.
Okay.
When we went to the Catholic Church, and I think that she was going back to her roots because we were in torment. We were in an abusive situation. So she decided to go one Saturday when we made it to this new town to the Catholic Church.
Right.
And this is her upbringing. Everybody from back then, 50, 60 years back, were Catholics. We went to the Catholic Church and they looked at us really, really funny. And they said, with all due respect, there are no black Catholics here.
Yeah.
So you probably need to leave here and go to a church in your area. And so I started going to all of the churches.
What about her?
My mother always had a relationship with God.
Okay.
And she would always say, this is how I get my blessings. And she would wink at me. She said, I always treat people the way I want to be treated because that's how I get my blessings. And she would wink at me. But as far as the nuts and bolts of Jesus Christ, I don't know if she had that.
Well, you said she had a relationship, and you would know better than anyone, I would think. If church is what she did, faith is what she did, even despite these circumstances of her life. I don't know. Lisa, do you pray for your kids?
Every day.
You pray for your kids?
Oh, yeah.
You think your mama prayed for you?
Of course. No doubt.
Okay. So when I start thinking about this stuff, I think about her in an abusive situation, dead end, no hope, what she must have felt in all of that. When she shot that guy, she was protecting her children, not herself. I'm just going to tell you. I wasn't there, but I'm going to tell you, that's a mama. That's a mama bear protecting her cubs. And I know more of that story because it's part of your video. It's not what we talked about here today. And but then you also, when you were at this church in Topeka, you talk about this woman that you had a lot of respect for, and the dream hit for you, right?
Right.
And she's warning you about that. If she's getting prophetic dreams, this is probably a woman of prayer as well. You had a man of God lay his hand on you and said, trouble is coming for you, but don't worry. I am going to cover you in prayer. God hears the prayers of his children, of the saints. Those people prayed you through that. If you're asking me, what happened? People interceded for you years, weeks, and days before all of these things happened. They joined God in his will for your life. You didn't know him. You weren't interested. You were just being Derrick, going and doing the things of the world and getting what you needed and all that stuff. Sounds like to me. And they stepped in for you in prayer. That's why, in my view, they put you in a cell that already had a Bible under that thing.
Wow.
That's why you heard that voice. That's why the Bible came alive for you when you picked it up for the first time. It came alive, even though you had probably read bits of it before. Do you see that? Do you see that God stepped in to your life to bring you out of something in large part, A, because he loves you and he wants you to be with him forever in heaven, but he ain't going to make you do something you don't want to do. You see any of that?
Well, I tell you this. I've never really had it articulated like that, but I thank you for saying that, and everything that you said is 100% true. Yes, I do see that, and it is true. I know for a fact that that's exactly what happened.
And when you look at all the things, I mean, you go back and you look at, you even make note of the fact that you go into court on is a Good Friday, right? You go back and you begin to piece things together, and you see it being, instead of a set of random fortunate circumstances, a more of a tapestry with intentionality behind small pieces that you wouldn't notice unless you were paying attention.
Right.
To it.
Right. I'm glad you said that. Now, I'm telling a story almost not like in retrospect, but in retrospect, I tell you, there was a point where I didn't know if God was real or not. But all of those questions were answered when I went through that experience. And now that I look at the whole thing in its totality, I tell you, even me sitting here today, God has ordered my steps. Says in the word that a righteous man's steps is ordered by God.
Certainly.
And one morning, a couple of months ago, I heard that scripture all of my life. A righteous man's steps is ordered by God. A righteous man's steps is ordered by God. Everybody throw it out. I've heard it. Amen. But I was reading a different translation, and it said that, in this particular translation, it says that God allows us to make the moves or the steps, but he ultimately controls the destination. My destination, even as a little boy, was in God's hands, even me sitting here right now. And I see that. I see it. Even the things that I've done that I shouldn't have done, even what the enemy meant for evil, God has somehow, some way turned it around and worked it out for my good. So when I moved to Atlanta, I was on fire for God. That question that I had, if he was real or not, of course I knew he was real, and I wanted to shout it from the mountaintop.
Because he revealed himself to you.
Yes, he did.
He went from being a concept that you find in one of those churches down there into an actual, real, living consciousness that you can communicate with and that guides you. It's the difference. It's the awakening that goes from, it's just a technique to keep everybody, morally in check, right? And that's what goes on over at the church, just a bunch of rules. And if you do that, into the awakening that God is actually real, that Jesus is alive now. And the awakening that occurs at some point, and even in Christians, I don't know how many have digested this fully yet, but that he is actually alive on the inside of you. That he's not like confined to some dimension out there somewhere that's quote unquote heaven, but that he lives on the inside of you. So when you hear a voice, that's him inside of you, in my view, in many cases, speaking. That's why it's like it was in me, but it was outside of me, right? It was a consciousness outside of my consciousness, located within me. And when we're awakened to that truth, it completely reshapes and reforms the way we see the world. Yeah. And that sounds to me like what happened with you. You were just a dude in the world, living life, getting what he needed to get, got to survive, need some money so I can get out of here, and all the other things. And those are the circumstances of life, and everybody's got a different set. Some of them are worse than you were. A lot of them are a lot better than you were, right? But when we become awakened to the truth of the presence of God and his mercy and his goodness and his working in our life that we just were blind to before, even though it was right in front of us the whole time, it changes you. I mean, it causes you to want to say, how can I know more? Where is that Bible? I can't get enough of it, right? It's like, it's not a bunch of these and thous and stuff. It's like suddenly the Bible becomes life. It becomes food. It's your nourishment. It is your hope. It is like the keys. It unlocks the whole thing.
Right.
It's like, wow, I can't get enough. I know that voracious appetite. I know the transformation that occurs when you immerse yourself in the Word of God. I had it. My story is a little bit different. I mean, it's a lot different. But in my story was this, like, I don't even know if you're real. If you are, I at least need to give you a shot and read your book. Right?
Right.
And I read it. And the more I read it, the more I wanted to read it. And when I finished it, I just flipped it over and started again.
Wow.
And in every word of that, I began to get reshaped. And it wasn't because I was buying some technique.
Mm-hmm.
It was God's word pouring into me and through me.
Right.
And you know that. I mean, that's what you're talking about. So my analytical mind, I like to know what happened. And so God touched you, but he touched you for many reasons. One, because he loves you, but man, you had people asking him to reveal himself to you, no matter what it looked like. I don't care that he doesn't believe in you. Put people in his path, put him in a jail cell where a Bible mysteriously shows up, have him charged for murder, whatever you got to do.
Man, you're telling my story better than me.
But whatever I got to do,
Yes.
whatever you got to do, God, for my son.
Yes, that's right.
Bring him home. In the end, bring him home. Whatever you got to do. That's my prayer for my kids. Whatever you got to do. I want it to happen through me. But if it's not through me, put somebody else in their path. Just bring them home. You know?
Yeah. I do.
I don't know if that resonates or if that's just me kind of going in a direction. I just know God loves it when people intercede for other people out of love. And I think that's what that man of God who laid his hands on your head did. I think that's what that woman who gets prophetic dreams did. She ain't got to tell you that. But she pulled you aside and said, hey, Derrick, I got one for you, man. I know that's what your mama did.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I got to agree. That's exactly what happened. I don't think I would be sitting here today had it not been for those prayers.
Yeah. Me either.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I hope people who are people of faith, who know God, and even those who don't that are watching this, if they know people that love them, that are people of faith, that have prayed for them, I want them to recognize that. But really what I want them to recognize, who are you interceding for?
Mm.
Who do you know that's lost?
Wow.
Who do you know that's lost? Are you like, man, that ain't good. Something's got to happen. You know what's got to happen? You got to happen. You got to intercede for them. You may be the only one. You know that person that can't get out of the club, out of the bars?
It's powerful.
That's committed to that life of destruction? What if nobody else is praying for them?
Wow.
Right?
You're right.
It's up to you. It's up to you. Let it be up to you. Let it be up to you. I feel that, man.
Me too.
I do. And I think God responds to those prayers. I think that's why you're sitting here. I really do. And I know there's more in the story, and we're going to get to that. And and when I think about what's coming, I think of the same things. I really do. So anyway, the question that started this whole bit of the conversation is like, what do you think happened? What do you think happened? And I guess we'll never know, but I guarantee you that was a part of it.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. God intervened.
Mm-hmm.
The prayers of the saints availed much.
As they're working.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So I moved to Atlanta. My wife and we got married with a blended family. And I introduced my wife to this walk of faith.
Mm.
My wife, she was a dreamer, and God was doing some supernatural stuff with her before she fully gave her life to God. It was just gifts that he gave her. But when she gave her life to Christ, it was like gasoline was poured on these gifts. And that's the good thing about it. I knew God in a certain aspect, but when watching my wife and the things that God was doing with her, I never witnessed those things before, which made me look at God in a totally different way. He was giving her chapter and verses of the Bible in her sleep before she even began to read the Bible.
That's awesome.
It was just mind-boggling, the stuff that God was doing with my wife. She used to dream, and see the future in her. She, even as a little girl, this is just a natural gift that God gave her.
Wow.
She had the gift of discerning spirits. When people would come and they would be coming saying that they're this or they're that, in the name of God, she could see the spirit that was working behind them.
Really?
Oftentimes she would see a face behind a face.
Like with her eyes?
I don't think it was her eyes. She was seeing in the spirit.
I love it.
Yes. And so the stuff that God was doing with my wife, it just made me just want to love the Lord even more. And I was just, her relationship and the things that God was doing with her just made me just be excited. And we were on fire. We were just reading our word. We learned how to pray in the spirit. We received the baptism of praying in the spirit. We received that baptism. We got some teaching. We started going to a prophetic church that taught healing, deliverance, miracles, and all of those things we learned. You access those things the same way you access becoming a believer. You do it by faith. And so we were taught, we were trained. We joined this church in Dunwoody, Georgia. That's like a training facility that teaches everyday average Christians that you don't have to go to the apostle, the bishop, the preacher, Sister Sue, that's super anointed to hear from God or prophesy. Anybody can do it. And so God was just doing this supernatural stuff, mind-boggling miracles with my wife. Now, before we got married, I'll back up and say this. My wife started smoking when she was a teenager. And I told her before we got married, I was like, I want you to be around a long time, so I don't want you smoking. I'm not going to marry somebody who smokes. And my wife, she said, listen, I'm not in the club, I'm not drinking. I enjoy drinking my coffee and I enjoy smoking my cigarettes. Don't bother me. So I'll say it's about a month later, she came to me. She said, have you noticed anything? I said, no, what's going on? She said, I haven't been smoking. And I was like, what? She said, I was riding to work one day and it was almost like the spirit of the living God floated, for lack of better words, into her car. She started speaking in this funny language and her tongue was moving so fast. She took the rearview mirror down just to look at her mouth. And she just started speaking in funny language, speaking in tongues. By the time she got to her work, people were outside smoking as normal, and she almost threw up. And from that day to this day, she's never smoked again. That's just an example of so many things that God was doing supernaturally, and it's made me just like, wow. It was just exciting to see all of the different things that God could do. And we had challenges. We had a lot of challenges. My son, due to the fact that I had made some bad decisions, my son up north was taken from his mother and he was put in a foster home. And so we moved to Georgia and we were doing good. And then we ran into this roadblock. Kansas said, Georgia, if you watch over this case, we will allow you to live with your son to come live with you. And so we rode off into the sunset. My son and I, we looked at each other and he was about 9 years old. He looked at me and he said, promise me that we'll never be apart again. So we made a pinky promise that we would never be apart again. We got down to Georgia and he was doing good. We were in church. We were loving the Lord. And then all of a sudden, we got a call from the officials in Georgia to say, they told me, listen, we've had a chance to look at your record. first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder. We're not saying that you're that person now, but we don't want anything to do with it. We can't be responsible for anything that happens. Put your son on a plane and send him back to foster home. And that kind of threw a monkey wrench in the whole plan. We were riding high. We were loving the Lord. We were sold out for Christ. And then this happens. Put him on a plane. We send him back to foster home. And he kept calling me. Now, I didn't have a lot of money at that time. We didn't have enough money to get a high-powered lawyer. And so he had other siblings, and his aunt was trying to get the other siblings out of foster home. And she said, well, you know, you're not going to get your son back because I spend thousands and thousands of dollars to try to get his siblings out of foster home. It didn't work. So who do you think you are? You don't have any money, and you're not going to get your son. They'll never give you your son back. And so my son kept calling me, Dad, when am I coming home? I said, look at it as a vacation. When am I coming home, Dad? When am I coming home? When am I coming home? And I didn't know what to do. And one night I heard that voice again. The voice simply said, and I realized that now there was the voice of the Holy Spirit. It said, remember what I taught you when you were locked down, how to walk by faith and not by sight. You have to walk by faith and not by sight. So I got a call from the lawyer. The lawyer said, we have a court date. Maybe on, I think it was Monday. It's like, but don't worry about it. You're not going to get your son back. This is just a preliminary. You don't even have to come. And that night, something rose up on the inside of me, and it said, you got to have faith. I knew the power of faith. Every time that I've stepped out in faith, God showed up in a miraculous way. I didn't have the money. I didn't have anything. So I stepped out in faith. I had to do something because they took my son. That was my everything. I had to do something. And so I looked at my wife and I said, okay, I got to step out in faith. So I'm not going to get a plane. I'm not going to get a plane. I'm going to rent a car because I'm believing that God is going to allow me to bring him back. I looked at my wife. I said, hey, get his room ready. And she said, why? I said, because I'm bringing him back. So be prepared. I'm just stepping out in faith. So I get to Kansas and I go to a church in Kansas that I always go to. It's called Faith Temple. When I went to Faith Temple, the church people made a circle around me and started thanking God for my victory, for getting my son back. And they would say, tell them thank you, tell them thank you. And so after the church service, I went to visit the lawyer. And I'll never forget, she had a pile of papers on her desk. And she kind of like looked at me like on the tip of her glasses. She looked at me and she said, oh, you decided to come anyway, huh? I told you not to come. You're not going to get your son back. And something happened to me that day that's never happened before. I looked at that woman, my lawyer, and I said, it just kind of bubbled up before I knew it. I said, have you ever seen a miracle? And she looked at me and she said, she kind of chuckled. She said, why? I said, because this time tomorrow you're going to see one. I said, oh, and she said, yeah, okay. I had brought some papers with me from he was doing pretty good in Georgia. My son was. So I brought all of these papers with me and I laid the papers out. And I said, these are all of the notes from his students, from his classmates back in Georgia. Everything is going good and they want him to come back home. And she said, you can put that up because the judge is not even going to see this. I told you don't even come. And so I went to the car. And I heard the other voice, the voice of the enemy. It said, who do you think you are saying something like that? And I said, I'm the child of the Most High. All I have is faith. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just believing and I'm trusting. I got the people to pray for me at the church. I decreed and declared. I did what I knew to do. And that Monday, we had court. Me and my son, I was like, listen, we rehearsed the whole thing. If the judge asks you what you want to do, just simply tell the judge you want to come home. You want to be with your dad. And so the time was here. The judge said, little man, is there anything you want to say? And he froze. The judge looks at me and the judge says, sir, do you have anything that you want to say? I said, well, I never had a father growing up and I've suffered so much because of it. The only thing that I've ever wanted to do is have a relationship with my son. I said, look at him. He looks just like me. Yeah, it's true. I made mistakes, but I'm not who you say I am on those papers. I'm totally changed. I've been working. I've been doing the right thing. I haven't broke the law in years. Just let me have my son. The judge took her glasses off, wiped her eyes, and she said, I think this is a bunch of foolishness. I want you to take your son and we'll never bother you again. I took my son. Well, matter of fact, I looked around in the court and everybody was crying. I was crying. My son was crying. The judge was crying. Even the lawyers was crying. My lawyer looked at me and she said, I want to let you know I apologize. I say, apologize for what? She said, I tried to turn you around at every step of the way. You didn't listen to me. She said, it's clear to see that you have something that I don't have. You have a relationship with God that I don't have. And she said, here today, you've made a believer out of me. Mm. And so that's just one of the examples, the supernatural things that God has done in my life. When I got out of jail, I knew with my wife and everything that was going on, I can keep you here all day explaining to you how many things God has done in my life, supernatural. You don't even want to know about the time that I was praying for this homeless man in the parking lot and money floated from the sky.
Huh? Come on, man.
Yes, sir. I've seen so many mind-boggling miracles. We will be here all night. But I'm saying all that to say, God has been so good to me, and I know that he's real, and he's a supernatural God.
What do you mean money floated from the sky?
Now you're getting me to start a long other conversation.
Try to keep it brief because I know we got another thing we got to hit.
Oh, the climax is coming. Okay. So I used to go to Martin Luther King Street when I worked for Jerry Pate. He's a professional golfer that won the Masters. I worked for him for 19 years.
Really?
Yes, sir. So I used to go over to the Chinese restaurant. I call this the parable of the Chinese restaurant. So I used to go over to the Chinese restaurant. One day I got to the Chinese restaurant. There was a guy behind the dumpster. He was all disheveled. And he reminded me of one of my sons. He was all disheveled. It was clear to see that he was homeless and was going through some things. Mm-hmm. And so he said, hey man, can you give me some money? Can you buy me something to eat? I said, yeah. I said, but I got to pray for you. If I buy you something to eat, I want to pray for you. Is that okay? He said, sure. He started telling me my grandmother, she's a missionary. And I'm like, okay, cool. But so I bought him some Chinese food and I prayed for him right there in the parking lot. This was a place that I went to often. So about 3 months later, I went back over there. Sure enough, here he comes again behind the dumpster. Hey man, can you buy me something to eat? And I was like, okay, man, I got to pray for you. So I prayed for him and bought him some Chinese food. About a couple of months later, as I was pulling in the parking lot, I wondered, was I going to see him again? Sure enough, he comes from behind the dumpster again. By now, I made up in my mind that I'm not giving him any money. You got to have wisdom in these things, I don't want anybody to use me, hit me being, I guess, I don't know what I was doing, but I wasn't going to give no money that day. And so I said, man, he said, man, can you give me some money today? I said, not today. But that particular day, he said this that stopped me in my tracks. He said, well, if you're not going to give me no money or buy me nothing to eat, at least pray for me. Oh, man of God, I what could I say? I had to. I said, okay, you got me. So I'll pray for you. And so we locked hands that day in Atlanta on Martin Luther King at the Chinese restaurant. We locked hands and we began to pray. I prayed that God would break the spirit that was over him, the demonic spirit. I prayed that God would give him the desires of his heart. I prayed the blood of Jesus Christ over his life to allow him to be everything that God called him to be. I was praying. I had my eyes closed. All of a sudden, I heard the Holy Spirit say, open your eyes. I opened my eyes just in enough time to see $20 float from the sky and hit me on my foot. And the Lord told me that day, he said, the next time I place it on your heart to give to somebody, you do it and don't worry about anything else. By the way, I don't need you to give anything to anybody, because if you don't want to do it, I'll float it from the sky. Now, the story would be perfect. The story would be good. And by the way, we had church. You know, it's easy to believe when you don't see. I mean, it's easy to believe when you see. We had church in that parking lot. I prophesied over his life. We preached down the walls that day in that parking lot after God did what he did. And so I went on and I prayed for him. And of course, he bought some food. I went on back to work. And about 4 or 5 months later, I rode down that street in Atlanta, Georgia, and I had a thought. I wonder, will I see him today? And I didn't see him that day. I bought my Chinese food. I went back to work. All of a sudden, the Spirit of the Lord said, look to your left. Now, I'm in Atlanta. There's millions and millions of people. He said, look to your left. I look to my left, and I see, and he was praying that he would find a job. He was praying that he would do better. He was praying that he would get a license and have gainful employment. That was his prayer, if you must know. And so the Holy Spirit said, look to your left. And I looked, and guess who I saw? I saw that boy getting on, dressed in a FedEx uniform. He had his hair done. He had a uniform on. And I was like, that couldn't be him. So I looped around, made a U-turn. And just as I was pulling beside the bus, I looked in his face, and it was him. God allowed me to intercede for him. And God did exactly what we was asking him to do. And God has and I'm saying that to say so many things like that. We can go all night about how many supernatural things that God had done and has done in my life. But Stacy, you already know there was this thing that I never told anybody. I never mentioned it.
Let's go.
I thought that I could hide it from my wife, my children, and even God. And so I was at my job, and my heart was, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. God had blessed me with this job for 19 years. I told you I worked for this professional golfer for 19 years, but I really wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to have my own business. And so I had tried to leave before. But that was before I went to this church that taught that I can hear from God for myself, this prophetic church. So now I'm armed with, by the way, I failed and had to go back to the job. And I was like, that's one thing. I said, God, at this job, let my light shine. Don't allow me anything that I do to soil your reputation with these people. So many people call themselves Christians, and how they act and how they talk, it cause people to stumble. So I said my prayer from day one, Lord, don't let anything that I do leave a bad taste in these people's mouth. So I'm at the job. I had failed. I tried to leave the job and I failed, and I had to go back to the job. And I was like, do you love me? They was like, yeah, we love you. Can I have my job back? And they gave me my job back after I failed. But I never stopped, gave up my dream of being an entrepreneur. So it got to the point to where I was so uncomfortable. So, but this time I said, I'm going to leave this job, but I am not leaving this job until I hear from God. The second time around, I'm not leaving until I hear from God. So I did everything that I normally would do to hear from God. I pulled every lever. I pushed every button. I turned every wheel, and God didn't say one word. And I became frustrated. I went to my wife and I was like, is God saying anything? She said, no, he hasn't said anything about the job. She said, but you know what? You're getting on my nerves. with this job, complaining, murmuring and complaining about this job. If you're so unhappy, why don't you just leave? I said, no matter what, I can't leave until I hear from God. But God didn't say anything. And I got so frustrated with that, I went to this little woman, powerful woman of God at our church. She's known all around the world from teaching about the prophetic. So I go to her, and I had a relationship with her, but I was the type of person, I really didn't like to bother the preacher, the prophet. I didn't bother him. She said, if you ever need me, let me know. But I didn't bother her. But then I got so frustrated until she saw me one day. She said, how are you doing? I was like, I'm doing pretty good. I said, no, that's not true. Can you pray for me? And she was like, yeah, I'll pray for you. Pray for what? I was like, the timing of the Lord, because I really want to leave my job and launch out to be an entrepreneur. So she lays her hands on my head, and she says these words that changed everything. She lays her hands on my head. I'm going about the job, the timing of the Lord, to be strategic. When can I leave my job? She lays her hands on my head and she says these words. She said, God is going to heal your heart and restore the relationship with you and your father. And for some reason, I just started to cry. And I'm not the type of person that cries easy, And so I started to cry, and I remember I was kind of, be honest with you, I was kind of upset. Because first of all, I wasn't going to her, asking her anything about my dad. Number two, she couldn't be hearing from the Lord, because surely that, I don't know if she knows or not, but I don't have a dad, and I never was going to have one. My mother never told me about my dad. By the way, when I was raised up, I didn't have any family members. I didn't have any aunts, uncles, cousins. I didn't have any family members on my mother's side. I didn't have any family members on my dad's side because I didn't know who he was. So cousins, aunts, families, I didn't have any of those things. I only had my mother and my 3 siblings. That's all I had growing up. So when she says these words, so there was nobody that knew anything about this man. She says these words, and I was kind of upset. I went home. I told my wife, I was like, I love her. She's so powerful. She's known all around the world. But the mighty woman of God missed it. We're only human. We prophesied in part. She missed it. Surely she missed it. By the way, my last name is Frank. I found Mr. Frank. And you know what he told me? He said, yeah, you found me. He said, but I'm not your dad. He said, when I got back from Vietnam, your mother was pregnant with you, and she said that she was raped, and I never saw her again. So I knew that wasn't my dad. And my mother died and never told me who my dad was. So here's the mighty woman of God saying these words. I couldn't receive it. I just couldn't. The mighty man of God. How many miracles I've saw, witnessed. But I had been psychologically programmed. Imagine being locked up for 48 years. All of a sudden somebody say, hey, by the way, you're free. I just couldn't. I couldn't get my mind around it. So I went home. I was upset. And I was asking her about my job. So I'm still frustrated about the job. And but she kept going to my wife months after that, telling my wife, don't you see it? Can't you see it? My wife was like, see what? She's like, your husband, when I laid hands on him, something shifted in the spirit in his life. My wife was like, my wife wanted to tell her, which she didn't, thank God. She wanted to tell her that he's still getting on my nerves about that job. So during COVID-19, I'm at my job. I'm murmuring. I'm complaining. To be honest with you, I wasn't staying sharp. I wasn't reading my word. I wasn't on fire like I was when I was locked down. God had been so good to me, and I kind of got comfortable. I didn't have that sharp edge. And I was murmuring, complaining, drinking, overbreaking like the rest of them. It was just a normal day. And I heard from heaven. This day, the Holy Spirit called me by my name, said, Derrick, you have forgotten who I am and what I can do. And I said, before I thought about it, I answered the Holy Spirit. I said, no. I never forget who you are. You've been so good. You saved me from getting killed. You have been there ever since I was a little boy. You have shown me so many miracles. No, I haven't forgot who you are. And before I knew it, I thought about it. Yeah. I wasn't staying sharp in my word. That relationship we had, it wasn't like it was. And I just started to cry. And the Holy Spirit said, today is your last day at this job. And just know, I'll be with you. I got in that car and I feel so good. I knew it was God. I knew it. Finally, you're talking, you're communicating. I've been fasting, praying, and I finally got my answer. So I get in the car. I'm exuberant. And I heard that other voice, that negative voice. And to be honest with you, said, fool, if you leave this job, you're going to lose everything you own. Don't even think about it. And as I was driving home, I was going back and forth. And because this is a big decision. We were not rich, but this had to be spot on. You know, this is how we survived. And so I started going back and forth. Did I really hear from the Lord? Did I really hear from the Lord? But this particular day, God did something so miraculous, so awesome, so wonderful. My wife worked from home, and when I got ready to open the door that day, the door almost opened by itself. And my wife's standing there. And I was like, why are you standing at this door acting weird? And she was like, I was praying this morning, and the Holy Spirit told me to tell you, Derrick, the only way you'll ever leave this job is to take a leap of faith. And I was like, wow. God knew I was going to doubt after he spoke to me. But he spoke to me and my wife in Atlanta, Georgia, in 2 separate locations at the same time. We were on one accord. And I tell you, this is the answer that I had been waiting on. I wanted to run down the street. I was so happy. The next day, I got to work. I loaded my car up. They were murmuring and complaining and drinking coffee as usual. And they did not know that I was getting ready to walk out of that place and live my dreams. And God finally gave me the answer of what I originally went to the woman of God for. But I want to let you know this. During COVID-19, I found my dad in a supernatural way. It's kind of hard for me to believe now. Now, I have to tell you this. I never prayed to find my dad. Even though everything God had did for me and through me, I don't know. I never had a dad, you know, and so it was so far from my mind. Maybe I buried it so deep. Every Father's Day, every birthday, every Christmas, I don't have a dad. God was my heavenly Father, and I was okay with it. Well, I tricked myself into believing that. And so when she said those words, I couldn't believe it. I just could not believe it. And I found him miraculously. And when it's a pretty intricate story how I found my dad. My wife was talking upstairs one day, and they were partying. They were having a good time, her and her friend from up north. And evidently she did a DNA test or something and found her relatives. And I had did a DNA test before, and I found out that I was 20% Nigerian. Who cared? I still didn't have a dad and never was going to have one. And so they were making noise. 2 and 3 days passed by, making noise, partying, just happy. And I was happy for her. But I was trying to watch the football game and I was going upstairs to tell them to keep it down. And my wife did what she normally would do. She would just have so many inspirations of the Holy Spirit. So this particular day, she said, my husband doesn't know who his dad is. Maybe he should do a DNA test. As soon as she said it, I was like, well, I already did a DNA test. I'll never find my dad. Nobody knows anything about him. Plus, it's been so long ago. Here I am, 48 years old. I mean, who is he? Is he alive? So much time has passed away. So I started saying all of the reasons why it would never work. Person on the other end, her friend said, well, you're a man of God and you can have faith, can't you? Got me. All right. I can have faith. I know the power of faith. So by faith, doubting, I will do this DNA test. Did a DNA test and come to find out, my great-great-granddad lived in Georgia many years ago, and he had 18 children. When I got the DNA test back, I instantaneously knew that I had thousands and thousands of cousins. And somebody had did all of the research to find my family lineage on my dad's side. And so I knew that my last name should be Carter from the DNA test. But the funny thing about it is there was this individual by the name of Reuben the Hurricane Carter who Denzel Washington played in a movie, a major motion picture called The Hurricane. He was sitting right on top of my family tree. So I was like, guess what? I have a Hollywood actor and a famous person in my family. My wife was like, so what? I think that you're getting off focus. Worrying about this man, you still don't know who your dad is. Let's not get off focus in who your dad is. But it was something about his story. So I found out everything I could about him. I did all of the research on YouTube. I had obituaries. I had census reports. And finally, I'll tell you this. As I was looking for my dad, all of those feelings that I thought that I had buried, they came bubbling up. It felt like I was a little boy again, waiting on my dad who never came. I thought I had buried it, but not all of these feelings are on the inside of me. And I'm really, the enemy is having a time with me. I'm tossing, I'm turning. And the enemy is saying, so what? You found your cousins, but you know that thing that you've buried on the inside of you. You know that desire of your heart that you've never really articulated. You'll never get it. You'll get your cousins, but you never get what you really, really want. And so my wife is saying, you're getting off focus, but every step of the way, the only thing I knew to do was walk by faith, not by sight. Walk by faith and not by sight. So it got to a point where I made it to a dead end. And so we was going to get a detective, private investigator to try to figure out my dad, get more information. And I talked to the private investigator. He said, well, with a name like Carter and it's all the information you have, it's going to be virtually impossible. But I'll try. It's going to be $5,000 to start with. But I'll be honest with you. He said, never underestimate somebody that refused to quit. It's like every time that I got to the end of myself, people were encouraging me. Keep going, keep going. And so I decided not to spend that money. My wife said, I would do anything I can to find your dad. She said, because I've never seen you like this before. I said, no, I think we need to just keep walking by faith. And I came across a BBC report about my cousin, Reuben the Hurricane Carter. And I contacted the BBC. Well, matter of fact, okay, so I heard episode 12 is called The Hurricane Tapes on the BBC. And my wife was like, you're getting off focus. I said, it's something about my cousin. It's something about it. So I came across episode 12. On episode 12, I heard this voice of this gentleman. He was a Carter, so I knew that worst case scenario, he was a cousin. Best case scenario, it was my dad. Could be my dad. And when I heard his voice, it was something that was like, whoa. Something kind of fluttered about this man. I contacted the BBC. Hey, can you get me in contact with this man? And they said, we'll do everything we can to link you up with this individual. God was ordering my steps the whole time. I found out that Reuben had went to be with the Lord, but he had a sister named Reverend Doris Carter. She was on Instagram, preaching at a church in New Jersey. I tracked her down and I said, hey, I want to introduce myself to you. She said, so step in line. We got it's a lot of us. We're from South Georgia and there's thousands of us. But, I didn't know it's the perfect timing of God. I didn't know that as I was reaching out to her, I didn't know that she was getting packed to go on vacation at the very same time I met her, but she didn't tell me that she was going to meet the person who I heard on the BBC report, Mr. Carter. And so she said, well, I don't know, but I'll do some research. She got back in 3 or 4 weeks and she said, hey, I got some good news for you. She said, I went and I talked to my cousin and she said, I think we hit pay dirt. She said, but I need to stay in my place. I'm not a sister. I'm a cousin. I got a number for you. He's willing to talk to you. He's not doing very well. He's sickly. She said, whatever you guys want to do, it's on you. And I got this number in my hand. This is a prime candidate to be my dad. And you would think that after 48 years, I'd have just ran and made the phone call, but a sadness came over me. And it was like I was 8 years old again, waiting for somebody who never came. So I said to my wife, you got to pray for me. You got to pray for me. This feeling came over me that I can't describe. She was like, you've been waiting all of your life for this. Make the phone call. I was like, you got to lay your hands on me. I can't. She laid her hands on me and I had the strength to do what needed to be done. I made the phone call and it was the exact man on episode 12 on the podcast from the BBC. It's the same man. He asked me a question. He said, what is your name? Where are you from? I told him my name and he said, well, I am your dad. He said, and I've been hiding from you all of my life. He said, do you come for war or do you come for peace? I said, I come for peace. He said, because you have every reason to be upset with me because I lied and I hid from you all of my life. He said, I was married and your mother was married and we went our separate ways and I never saw you again. He said, I haven't been on Facebook. I haven't been on social media because I've been hiding from the truth. And he said, what is it that you want from me? I said, I just want to get to know you. I got questions about who I am and where I came from. I said, and who knows? Maybe I can be a blessing to you. And he just started crying, started weeping uncontrollably. He told me, he said, I don't know how long I got to live. I really don't know. He was a functioning alcoholic. He had a colostomy bag and he was a partier and he was not well. He had cancer. He was blind in one eye. He just wasn't doing good. He said, I think God allowed me to live this long so that I could make things right with you and me. He said, I don't know how long I got, but I'm gonna give you all I got as long as I can. And so, to be honest with you, I still really can't believe everything that's taken place. It's hard to believe. God gave me the desires of my heart. He restored the relationship with me and my dad, and I never prayed the prayer. He did it. God did it just because he loved me. And so I was invited to my first family reunion and meet my dad for the first time. I was just so happy. And I got an email from one of the ancestry sites. It's this young girl who was given up for adoption. She's looking for her mother. She's half white. She's looking for her mother. And she thinks that she's my cousin. But I had already done this whole DNA thing so I could read DNA because it was my story. I took one look at the DNA and I realized that this is not my cousin, this is my sister. So I was armed with this information. Before I met my dad for the first time, my wife and I was like, now my dad is older. Matter of fact, let's talk about the perfect timing of God. I found my dad when he was 84 and I was 48. God was ordering my steps all along the way. And so my wife and I, we kept going back and forth because my dad wasn't well about the timing. When do we tell him about this young girl who was given up in the 60s? I think she was like 64, 65 years old, was given up for adoption. And I just didn't know how he was going to receive me. This is my first time meeting him. We're going to a family reunion and I'm armed with this. I thought it was good news, but I had to tread lightly because I was introducing myself to him for the first time. And I said, can I tell him now? My wife was like, no, it's not the time. Now is not the time. So we followed him from Baltimore to Virginia to have some one-on-one time. And before I could tell him, he says, we were sitting down late one night and he said, there's some things that I'm ashamed of. And there's some things when I got cancer, I thought I was going to die. I asked God to forgive me of. He said, number one, lying to my wife and cheating on her. Number two, hiding from you. And number three, there was this girl. When I was in Oregon, I was in the military, and back then the KKK was prominent and relationships with black and white didn't take place. The last person that messed with a white woman, they killed him. This woman came and said that she was pregnant by me. I got out of town and moved to England. When I got to England, my company commander came to me and said, there's a letter for you here. A woman is saying that you have a baby by her and she wants to give the baby up for adoption. What do you think? He said, I don't know if it's my baby or not. The little girl name is Kim. I don't know if it's mine or not, but whatever she wants to do, I support it. My dad was telling me that night. And my wife looked at each other. We looked at each other and I was like, is it the time? She said, yes, this is the time. I said, Dad, that little girl has contacted me and she thinks that she is my cousin, but she is Kim, you just mentioned. And my dad just started staggering back. And he said, man, I cannot believe it. All the mistakes that I've made in my life. And God has given me the chance to get it right. He said, I don't know what God is doing, blessing me so much. And he said, I don't know how long I got. He had been telling me that. I don't know how long I got. I don't know how long I got to live. And I was being funny with him. I said, Dad, may the great king live forever. This day he got mad at me. He said, listen, boy. He said, I could be wrong, but I don't know how long I got. I just got that feeling that I don't have long. And he was right. He died a year and a half after that. All of us was reunited. We made the phone call to Kim. She lived in Baton Rouge. Remember, she was never looking for her dad. The family that she was raised with, she thought that was her dad. And she was a product of infidelity. All of her life, she thought that the man who raised her was her dad. Remember, she wasn't looking for her dad. She knew who her dad was. But I came with the news, hey, I got good news for you. This is your dad, and I'm your brother. And she said, what? And my dad told me, he said, Dad, do you have a bucket list? He said, man, I've been all over the world and I've did everything I want to do. Then he called me back. He said, you know what? I want to make a second bucket list. And number one on the list, I want to come to Atlanta for Thanksgiving. So when I tell you we had a celebration in Atlanta, Georgia with Kim, all of my boys, all of my grandkids, and we just had a wonderful time. All of those questions I had about my dad, we had a good time. And quickly after that, he went downhill and passed away. But as I was getting ready to close that casket, I was reminded what the woman of God said 2 years before. She said God was going to heal my heart and restore the relationship with me and my dad 2 years before. As I was closing that casket, I had tears in my eyes, but joy in my heart, because God did exactly what he said he would do, and he did it just because he loved me, and I didn't even ask him to do it. So that's part of my story.
Well, when you look at everything overall as a whole, you know, one of the things that you had said before to me that I don't know that we mentioned necessarily in this is that when you were a little boy that your mother had received an inheritance from her dad, and you guys were kind of set up, and then when the decision was made to go with this guy in Arkansas, it's kind of when everything began to fall apart, which led you down this path of drugs and the things that got you into the position you were in. You know, and I just think back to that beginning and then where you are now. And the intercessory prayer, the way God came and got you. And I just think back through scripture and in other people's stories that I've heard. And I'm reminded that God is a God of restoration. You know, that's the story of Job. Everybody says I'm Job, and they talk about all the misfortune, but it was a restoration. That's how that story ends. And a restoration into something even greater. And I think it should create hope in people who are in the hard places, who are in the jail cell, who are struggling with the job, who are estranged from their family members or whatever else it is. It's like, how can there be a God if these circumstances are going on? And I've said this many times, and I will say it again. In those situations, I say the story isn't over. We serve a God that restores and that heals and that binds up. And when I hear this about your dad, especially, and you got 5 kids and a wife who's here with you now and grandkids and all these things, that's not the guy that was in that jail cell. All the things fell apart. Mm-hmm. And I just look at it holistically, seeing the whole picture. And, you know, your story's not over yet. But already is this restoration. You know, you took yourself down a path that you didn't have to take yourself down. And you did the things you had to do, or you felt like you had to do to get out. You didn't have it doesn't sound like you had a heart that was intent on evil or doing wrong. Sometimes you make decisions that you feel like you have to do. Sometimes you do, right? Sometimes it is about selfish behavior and just getting what you want to get for yourself. But when you turned, when God put that Bible, or put you in a place where there was a Bible under a cot, as much intercessory prayer or who knows what all took place to align with God's will for that to happen, and he he pulled you in over decades. I see restoration. Do you see restoration?
I definitely do. I definitely do. Definitely restoration. And I'm glad that you said that. I'm glad that you articulated it like that. And I just never really thought about it like that. But I'm just now reminded that that's what the woman of God said. She said that God was going to restore the relationship. Restoration. You are right. That's the common theme that's going through this whole story. Restoration. Absolutely. I do see that.
But back then at 6, 7, 8 years old, and as you got into that, I mean, you had your mom and your siblings, and then the family shredded, right? You couldn't wait to get out. I don't know what happened with your siblings, but you were apart from your mom and all that kind of stuff. And now, especially as you had reconciled with your dad, and I think about your kids and your grandkids now running around your house. It's like your family has been assembled. It's the opposite of shredding. It's uniting. It's restored. You were in a better financial position when you were 6 and receiving an inheritance or whatever. It all falls apart. All that goes away, and now you're in a lot of that is restored. I don't know. I see a full circle thing here, and we talk about how you've experienced God, and a lot of cases there are moments that you can clearly identify God breaking in. If those voices were the voice of God, I mean, I would see those as a moment, right? Lift up your mattress, step out of the house, God breaking in. But when you pull back from the whole thing and see the whole restoration piece, the intercessory prayer piece, I mean, you can clearly see experiencing God with an entire view of your life, not just in particular moments. And
Right.
And we value that just as much as the big moments of he appeared in front of me, right? And I heard an audible voice, or my cancer went away, or all the things that we have here on this podcast.
Right. And I'm reminded, since you asked about my siblings, and not every day, but I thank God often for just giving me the opportunity to be here. I do not take anything lightly. Remember, somebody lost their life in my yard. And then my brother went to prison when he was 16. He got out when he was 23 and got killed 3 months later. So he died when he was 23 years old. And I buried him beside my mother when she died young, when she was 56. And so many times in my life, and this is for somebody, so many times in my life, I thought that the sun would never shine again for me. I thought that this was the end for me. I thought my best years were behind me. But I was so wrong. I wanted to give up. I want to let you know, don't give up. I'm so glad that I didn't give up all of those years ago, because little did I know that God had some supernatural blessings in store for me. I'm so glad that I did not give up, because 2 boys raised in the same household, one is dead and one is sitting here today.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm only sitting here because of the grace of God.
Yeah.
And those people who no doubtedly interceded on my behalf.
Yeah.
And I'm just excited about the future.
Well, it's your life is a powerful story of restoration, of hope. I think one of the things that really has stuck with me in this is walking by faith and not by sight, and doing things that don't make sense in the moment. If God has called you to do something or step in a particular way, and you don't clearly see the path ahead of you to step anyway, if you feel like that's Him calling you to do it, and you've done that many times. I often ask the question as we're sort of coming in to park the car here, given everything that you've experienced and where you are now, do you have a message for people? I mean, I know you gave one right there around it's not over, don't give up, that sort of thing. But is there a message in particular that God has put on your heart to share?
Yes, and you've already stated it, and that's how the Holy Spirit, He works. Before I could say it, you said it. I was thinking last night, what is the message? The overall message is to walk by faith and not by sight. You think about it, there was a point in time that I didn't even believe that God was even real. But yes, He is real. And He wants to have an up-close and personal relationship. I did the religious thing, but God is personal, up close and personal. You could talk to Him, and He will communicate. I don't want to say talk. He could talk, but God is so awesome. He could give you a dream. He could speak through somebody else. God is awesome. He wants to communicate with you. And my other thing is, first thing, walk by faith and not by sight. And that's what God is requiring us to do as believers. It says in the Word that without faith, it is impossible to please Him. You have to do it His way. I didn't make the rules. The rules is you got to walk by faith and not by sight. That's a message. But my last thing that I want to say is that this message is for church people. Church people. I went to church, I saw the miracles, but I had a limit. I placed a limit on God and what He could do. My message is to anybody. There is no limit in God. Here I am, the mighty man of God, and I didn't even pray about this thing that I was hiding. Because I thought that, to be honest with you, I thought finding my dad was on the same level as raising the dead. One of the first things I was going to do when I made it to heaven, I was going to ask God, who is my daddy? It was something that great. So if I was to leave a party message, walk by faith and not by sight. And if you ask a lot of people, they will say, oh, God could do anything. But don't be like I was. I had some limits I placed on God. Oh, God, you can do this, but you can't do that. Oh, God, you'll even do it for that person, but will you do it for me? There is no limit in God. And that's the reason why I go back to the job. The original reason why I went to the man of God, the woman of God. I was looking for an answer, and He said, you forgot who I am and what I can do. It was like God was flexing His muscles. There is no limit in me. All things are possible for those who believe.
Yeah, that's so good. Derrick Frank, you've done a great job here today, man, and you've taken us. We're all kind of hanging on the edge of our seat. You're a great storyteller, and the way you articulate the events of your life, and the way you recognize the awakening that occurred in you to the truth of the presence of God is really cool. You know, you didn't really talk about this much. You serve in ministry now as a pastor, I believe, and you've also written a book. I have not read this. You brought it with you today, and but we're going to put it in the episode description and some links on how to get that. It's called So-Called Bastard, Reborn King, How to Become More Than You Ever Imagined. So that's the book that you have written recently, I think, and I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm also expecting you to sign this before you get out of here today. I like signed copies from the people who have been here of their books, and so.
Yes.
But anyway, like I said, we'll have links to this in the episode description for people who want to go check it out, and I would encourage you to do that. But Derrick, you did a great job. I appreciate you and your beautiful wife, Lisa, coming in today, and we prayed blessings over you. We will continue to pray blessings over you, and I still think you've got much more ahead.
I receive that.
Thanks for coming today, man.
Thank you.
Whether you believe it was God who spoke to Derrick in that jail cell is up to you. I believe he did. And I think it's incredible that there was a Bible under his mattress and that his life transformed from there, so much so that Derrick is now a pastor spreading the good news of Jesus Christ. But I'll go back to this again and again. I think most of us don't place the proper value on prayer for others. James 5:16 says that the prayer of a righteous person has great power as it is working. You will never convince me that Derrick was transformed by God apart from the prayers of his mother and the people who stood in the gap for him in their time with God. You want to save your loved ones? Change your community? Change the world? I believe your most powerful tool is prayer, when it aligns with the known will of God for everyone to be saved. Don't take this power lightly. Become an intercessor for the lost. Thank you for joining us today on A Stronger Faith. We've included a link to Derrick's book, So-Called Bastard, Reborn King, in our episode description below. Be sure to check it out. If you know someone whose story of encountering the presence and power of God needs to be heard, especially if that someone is you, we'd love to hear about it. Head to astrongerfaith.org/contact and tell us there. And if you feel like God's prompting you to partner with this ministry and help us carry these stories to more people, you can give simply and securely at astrongerfaith.org/give. Until next time, we pray that God reveals to you everything you already carry in Him, and that He builds a stronger faith in you and in those you love.